When you're knitting in the round and changing colors, at the point where you change the colors, the next row is going to always jog up, and you'll have these little uneven areas where it jumped up to the next round. And there's a way to avoid this, and I figured out how to do it from a hand knitting technique. On this one you can barely see the jog. It's there, but you can barely see it. If I turn this over, you'll see where my tails are, where I changed colors, and I just kind of tied them together. Right here there's just a barely noticeable little jog, and I figured out how to do a slip stitch on the Addi knitting machine so that you can avoid these little jogs of color change. Okay, I'm back to the beginning where knitting the needle number 1 is fixing to approach the yarn guide, and I want to change colors at this point. So I don't want to carry my yarn up the back of the knitting, so just cut it and let it hang. I'm going to let this white needle finish knitting the blue, and then I'm going to thread up with my new color and just kind of hold on to both of those, and I'm going to knit back till needle number 1 starts to knit again. I'm going to do a complete round with the new color, and I'll usually stop and just tie these together so they don't start spreading out. And I'm going to go slow so I don't pass up needle number 1. Okay, just as needle number 1 is getting ready to grab that yarn, I'm not going to let it grab the yarn. I'm going to do what is called slip. And when you do a slip stitch, the needle holds on to the, even in hand knitting or on the flatbed knitting machines, the needle holds on to that stitch, but it doesn't knit it. But if I let this needle sink down, right now the stitch is on these little teeth because it's supposed to have a piece of yarn come down and trap it in place. But there's going to be nothing to hold it once I take this yarn out of the hook of this needle. So I'm going to pop this back up into the hook of the needle, and I'm going to make sure when I'm knitting forward that it's going to be trapped under the hook of that needle. But I also want to tighten this up because you're going to end up with a little float on the back of your knitting, and that's normal for a slip stitch. So I'm just going to crank, and as I do, I'm going to tug on my working yarn a little bit for these first couple of needles. And then I can continue knitting as many rounds as I want to for that color. And that will prevent that jog for the color change. I'm going to do that one more time. It's more evident if you do more rows. I'm going to go ahead and change color again. But I want this needle to knit that loop. Close that, and then just hold on to these. And then knit a complete round in the new color. A lot of this can be done later. I just like to get it out of my way. And stop when I get back to needle number 1. And then I let it go forward for the next round, but I don't let it grab the new stitch. And I make the old stitch stay in the hook. And watch it and make sure it gets trapped in there. And then put a little tension on that next 2 or 3 needles, and then knit your next color. And that's all there is to doing a slip stitch.